welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into something absolutely fascinating, a hidden cognitive skill that operates completely under the radar. The logic of elite performance, especially in sports like football, has always seemed pretty straightforward to us on the outside. You need to be fast, you need to be strong, you need to be incredibly skillful. That is exactly why clubs drop hundreds of millions on explosive forwards, colossal defenders, and silky midfielders. We're totally conditioned to look at the physical body to explain greatness. But what if the ultimate separator between an average professional and a world-class genius isn't actually in their feet, but in their mind? Today, we're unpacking the invisible advantage that dictates exactly what elite minds see way before the rest of us even realize what's happening. To really wrap our heads around this, we have to start with a piece of footage that baffles casual fans but completely obsesses the experts. Picture this. It's 2009. Frank Lampard is playing for Chelsea. There's this 16-second clip of him from that time circulating online. And if you watch it casually, honestly, absolutely nothing spectacular happens. There's no goal, there's no jaw-dropping assist. It's literally just a player receiving and distributing passes. Just normal, everyday football. And yet this specific, seemingly ordinary video is passed around by tactical analysts, sports scientists, and top-tier coaches like it's a priceless work of art. Because those who actually know what they're looking at, they see something happening in those 16 seconds that most people will simply never, ever notice. So you gotta ask yourself, what exactly was he doing that others weren't? Because here's what kind of doesn't make sense about Frank Lampard on paper. He wasn't the fastest player on the pitch, he definitely wasn't the most technical or flashy. Over the years, there were plenty of players with way more raw explosive talent playing his exact position. And yet, despite lacking those extreme physical traits, for nearly a decade he was consistently one of the most efficient, deadly midfielders in the entire Premier League. He always seemed to have all the time in the world. He always seemed to know exactly where the ball needed to go. The mystery of his dominance is quite literally hidden in plain sight. Section 1. The Science of Scanning. To crack the code of players like Lampard, we're turning to the rigorous research of Professor Guy Jordet, who has spent decades studying exactly how professional players perceive their environment. So since 1997, Jordet's research team has painstakingly observed hundreds of pro athletes and elite youth players. And when they finally crunched the data from a massive stack of live Premier League camera footage, one completely staggering statistic jumped out: 6.2. Out of 117 Premier League players studied in this massive data set, Frank Lampard performed a mind-blowing 6.2 visual scans in the 10 seconds right before he received the ball. That was the highest rate among every single player they analyzed. Think about that. While everyone else is glued to the immediate action, Lampard is checking his surroundings more than once every 2 seconds, well before the ball is anywhere near him.
Okay, so what exactly is this behavior? We define visual scanning as the art of turning your head away from the ball before receiving it, specifically to collect environmental information that you're going to use 2 or 3 seconds later. Sounds incredibly simple, right? Maybe even a bit obvious, but if it were truly obvious, literally everyone on the pitch would be doing it at that high frequency. And the data proves they absolutely do not. Here is the real game changer. When you watch a football match, your intuition, your natural human attention, goes straight to the ball. You watch the guy who has it, you watch the guys chasing it, the whole pitch just seems to exist because of this one moving object. But the elite player, they completely defy that natural intuition. They actively force their eyes away from the ball.
Section 2. Building the mental map. The best players in the world are essentially playing a game of chess out there, calculating 2 or 3 moves ahead. So how exactly does a player construct this high-speed map in real time? Well, they're actively gathering intelligence so that when the ball finally arrives, the decision of what to do with it is already a done deal. If you slow down that 2009 video of Lampard and just watch his head, it's honestly a little unsettling. His head is darting constantly, left, right, over the shoulder, while the ball is still 15 meters away. But in that split-second glance, the brain isn't snapping a high-res photo of the field. Jordet explains that it's actually picking up much more primitive cues: moving shadows, flashes of a jersey color, the blur of a body shifting to one side. But when a player repeats this rapid process 4, 5, 6 times in the seconds before getting the ball, those fragments stitch together. They layer up. Suddenly, this player has mentally mapped opponent pressure, teammate positions, and future passing lanes that don't even exist yet but absolutely will exist in 3 seconds. Let's look at just how extreme this mapping can actually get. Take Xavi Hernandez, the legendary Barcelona midfielder. He completely mastered this art. In fact, he was so relentless with his environmental mapping that he actually got a rather bizarre nickname from his teammates, the girl from The Exorcist. Why? Because in some matches, he was clocking over 500 head turns, 500 scans in a single game. Xavi's spatial awareness was so deeply ingrained that it literally bled into his everyday life. He once admitted that when he walks into a totally normal room, like a restaurant, he automatically analyzes how the chairs and tables are arranged. He said, "I always want to sit where I can see everything. It's a reflex." Now, don't think this is just some quirky trait from a few historical legends. Look at Rodri, the 2024 Ballon d'Or winner. In one 50-second clip against Aston Villa, researchers caught him executing this astonishing sequence. He drops back to receive a pass, and in just a few moments, he checks over his shoulder 5 times. When they asked him later to break down his thought process for the final pass he made, a pass that set his teammate Ilkay Gundogan up for a one-on-one with the keeper, Rodri described about 6 entirely different cognitive processes, all happening from the moment the ball was passed to him to his final touch. 6 distinct, incredibly complex calculations executed in exactly 2 seconds. That is the unbelievable power of the mental map. Section 3. The coaching blind spot. Now, if this skill is scientifically proven to be this devastating, it is highly perplexing that it's almost completely ignored by coaching establishments. To really give you an idea of how big this blind spot is, Professor Jordet once casually mentioned to a coach in England's League One that players might really benefit from knowing the exact timing of that final critical scan. The coach literally just smiled and said his midfielders wouldn't even know what he was talking about. Christian Thorsvedt, a Norwegian midfielder playing over in Italy, even admitted he has never heard a senior-level coach so much as mention scanning in a team meeting. No way, right? And yet, the data clearly separates the good from the great. Arsene Wenger, the legendary former Arsenal manager, observed this with surgical precision. He noted that in the Premier League, standard good players absorb between 4 and 6 pieces of information in the 10 seconds before getting the ball. But the very good players, the true elite, they're absorbing between 8 and 10 pieces of information in that exact same 10-second window. That is practically double the environmental awareness, double the data points feeding into the brain before any physical action even starts.
And the consequences of ignoring this skill, they are absolutely catastrophic at the highest level. Look at this alarming data from the 2020 European Championship. Researchers dug in and found that out of the 133 goals conceded from open play during the whole tournament, a staggering 38% were caused by closed body positioning or a direct lack of scanning. That is 3 out of every 8 goals. Just let that sink in for a second. These weren't goals given up because a player lacked technical skill or got outmuscled or made some huge tactical blunder. They were conceded simply because of a lack of environmental awareness. The defenders quite literally did not see the threat coming because they just forgot to look.
Section 4. The subconscious genius. Because eventually, for the absolute best in the world, this relentless scanning completely stops being a conscious chore. When Jordet actually sat down and interviewed the best players, the ones processing the most information, their answers were super surprising. Lampard himself said years later that, sure, he was somewhat aware he was scanning, but he never realized the sheer volume of it. It had become entirely automatic. But we also have to talk about the environment factor here, because context totally dictates how this mental mapping works. Think about strikers, guys like Erling Haaland or Kylian Mbappe. Jordet's research shows they scan way more than average players, but it looks drastically different from a midfielder. A striker operates in this tight, compressed space, totally surrounded by defenders, so their scans have to be faster, more fragmented, and highly instinctual. Now compare that to a midfielder, who operates in wide-open space and needs a full 360-degree map. This is exactly why players who change positions often struggle so much. Take Joelinton at Newcastle. When he converted from a striker to a midfielder, there was one match where he was dispossessed from behind twice in just 7 minutes. Why? Because he spent his whole career building spatial awareness focused entirely on the front of the field as a striker. Dropping him into the 360-degree chaos of the midfield left him totally vulnerable to blind spots. Which brings me to this fascinating quote from Arsenal captain Martin Odegaard. When researchers showed him footage of himself making a highly critical scan during a match, he literally reacted like he was watching a total stranger. He just went, "I didn't know I did that. Oh, I scanned the field there." Turns out Odegaard had been drilling this scanning habit in his living room since he was 8 years old. It was so deeply ingrained, so perfectly automated, that it had completely vanished from his conscious awareness. His brain was just doing all the heavy lifting entirely on autopilot. So the absolutely crucial takeaway from all this observation and data is summed up beautifully right here. The best players in the world don't just have better feet, they have minds that never stop turning. Going way back to that 16-second clip of Frank Lampard, he was seeing a game that hadn't actually happened yet. He wasn't reacting to the play, he was anticipating it. He was building that mental map, updating it every half second, getting his body positioned right before he even touched the ball. By the time the pass actually arrived, his decision was already made. That right there is why the elite looks so impossibly calm when everyone else looks panicked and rushed. The game is being played and won in their minds before it ever materializes on the pitch.
And that brings us to our final thought for this explainer, because honestly, this isn't just a lesson about football. It's a pretty profound look at how we all interact with the world around us. So I'm going to leave you with this question. If mastery is defined not by what you do, but by what you see before you do it, what are you currently missing in your own environment? Are you staring so intently at the ball directly in front of you that you're entirely blind to the opportunities and the threats developing right there in your periphery? Take a second today to scan your own field. Thank you so much for learning with us, and keep those minds turning.